There is a moment, just before sleep, when the body does something strange. The muscles release, the breath deepens, and then, without warning, the mind snaps back. A falling sensation, a sudden jolt, the heart pounds for no reason. You are in your bed, you are completely safe, and yet something in you just screamed. Scientists call it a hypnic jerk. Most people dismiss it as a glitch. It is not a glitch. That involuntary spasm, that silent alarm that fires just as consciousness lets go, is one of the oldest things still living inside you. Older than language, older than memory. It is a reflex inherited from ancestors who could not afford to fully surrender to sleep. Not when something was moving in the dark. Not when the fire had gone low. Not when the night was long and the world outside was genuinely, completely, without exaggeration, trying to kill them. You carry that reflex in your nervous system right now. The question is, what did they do with it? Most people, when they imagine early human life, imagine something simplified, primitive, reactive. That is not what the evidence shows. What the evidence shows is something far more complicated and far more disturbing. Because surviving in the ancient world was not simply a matter of running faster or hitting harder. It required the construction of an entirely different psychological architecture, a way of processing fear that modern humans have largely dismantled, without fully understanding what they lost. The ancient world did not break the people who lived in it. In many ways, it built them. The question is how. In 2016, a neuroscientist named Joseph Ledoux published a revision of everything science thought it understood about fear. His argument was precise, uncomfortable, and largely ignored by popular culture. He said this: fear, the experience of fear, the feeling, is not the same as the survival response. They are two separate systems. Running from a predator and feeling afraid are not the same event in the brain. One is ancient, automatic, shared with every vertebrate on Earth. The other is something the human mind generates afterward, a story it tells itself about what just happened. This distinction matters enormously, because it means that ancient humans were not simply flooded with emotion and forced to act through it. They were equipped with a system that could act first, instantly, correctly, and feel later. The terror was real, but it arrived after the body had already begun to respond. The body was always faster than the mind. That speed was the difference between living and not. Picture this: a human, female, roughly 30 years old, which, in that world, made her experienced, positioned near the edge of a forest, gathering something from the ground, moving slowly, staying low. The light is beginning to fail. The sky above the trees is the color of old copper. She does not know what she is about to hear, but something in her does. There is a phenomenon that researchers have documented in modern hunter-gatherer populations and in animal behavior studies that does not have a clean scientific name but is sometimes called perceptual priming. The brain, under conditions of known threat, low light, familiar predator territory, the hour before dark, begins preloading threat signatures. It does not wait for something dangerous to appear. It starts looking before there is anything to see. She stops moving. The forest is exactly as it was. And yet, the human sensory system, researchers have found, is not designed to be accurate. It is designed to be fast. These are not the same thing. The visual cortex will generate a threat response to a curved shape in peripheral vision, a shape that might be a snake, before the conscious brain has had time to confirm whether the shape is real. The amygdala fires, the cortisol releases, the muscles prepare, and sometimes the shape is just a root. But the times it was not a root, those are the times that mattered. Those are the times that selected the survivors. The people whose brains were willing to be wrong, willing to flood the body with adrenaline over a shadow, willing to humiliate themselves by flinching at nothing, those people lived longer. The ones who waited for certainty frequently did not. This is the first thing to understand about how ancient humans survived terror. They did not try to eliminate it, they used it. Here is what most people assume about early human survival: that it was individual, that the strongest, the fastest, the most physically capable were the ones who made it. The archaeological record suggests something almost opposite. Excavations across multiple continents have revealed skeletal remains of individuals who survived catastrophic injuries, broken femurs healed improperly, spinal fractures fused over years, degenerative joint diseases that would have severely limited mobility. In a purely individual survival model, these people should not have lived long enough for their bones to show long-term healing. They did not have the strength to hunt. Many could not have traveled efficiently. Some could barely walk. They survived anyway, because something was keeping them alive. That something was the group. Anthropologist Kim Sterelny has argued that what makes humans genuinely unusual as a species is not intelligence alone, not tool use, not language, but the transmission of accumulated knowledge through cooperative networks. The group was not just a social arrangement, it was a cognitive system. Each individual carried a fragment of what the collective needed to survive. The tracker who knew the animal paths, The elder who remembered where water appeared after a dry season. The healer who understood which plants reduced fever. The mother who could read the sky. Alone, each was incomplete. Together, they were something that had no rival. The terror of the ancient world was real. The darkness was real. The predators were real, but they were being faced not by isolated individuals, but by a distributed intelligence that had been refining itself for hundreds of thousands of years. That is not a comforting image so much as it is a humbling one. But the group carried its own dangers, because groups require trust, and trust, in a world where one wrong decision could kill everyone, was not freely given. Researchers studying social bonding in small-scale societies have found something striking. The most socially cohesive groups, the ones best equipped to coordinate, to respond collectively to threats, to maintain the psychological resilience necessary to keep functioning under sustained pressure, were not necessarily the groups with the most resources. They were the groups that had learned to grieve together. The ritual processing of loss, communal mourning, shared ceremony around death, the collective acknowledgement of what had been taken, appears, from the archaeological evidence, to predate agriculture, predate permanent settlement, predate almost everything we associate with civilization. The oldest known deliberately buried human remains have been found with objects placed alongside them. Pigment, tools, flowers. This is not sentimentality. This is psychological technology. A group that cannot process its fear together will eventually fracture. The individual who cannot externalize terror, who carries it alone, silently, without ceremony, eventually becomes dangerous to those around them. Erratic. Withdrawn, a point of unpredictability in a system that cannot afford it. The ritual was not about the dead, it was about the ones who remained. It was a mechanism for surviving the knowledge of what the world was capable of. We should be specific about what they were afraid of. Not afraid of in the abstract. Not anxious. Not unsettled. Genuinely, acutely, physically afraid. The megafauna of the Pleistocene were not what modern people typically imagine. They were not the distant, retreating animals visible through the windows of safari vehicles. They were present, competitive, and in many ecosystems, dominant. The cave lion Panthera leo spelaea was significantly larger than the modern African lion and ranged across vast territories. The short-faced bear of North America stood nearly 6 feet at the shoulder and could run at speeds that would have been impossible to outpace. The spotted hyena, which still exists, operated in clan sizes that have since declined dramatically. Ancient packs were capable of displacing everything else from a kill, including apex predators. And then there was the cave hyena, the dire wolf, the giant forest buffalo, the ground sloth that could disembowel a large predator with a single defensive swipe. These were not dangers to be worried about in theory. These were the things moving in the darkness beyond the fire. Humans, physiologically, are not well designed for this. We are slow. Our senses in darkness are poor. We have no natural armor, no venom, no significant physical deterrent. A healthy adult human is, by the measurement of the natural world, a medium-sized prey animal with unusually good endurance. And yet, something happened in the human response to terror that did not happen in most of the animals around them. Something that researchers are still, cautiously, trying to describe accurately. The threat did not just activate the fight-or-flight response. It activated the imagination. Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio has spent decades investigating what he calls the somatic marker, the body's system of encoding emotional significance into physical sensation. Fear is not processed purely cognitively. It lives in the body, in the tightening of the chest, the cooling of the hands, the particular quality of silence that feels different from ordinary silence. Ancient humans, Damasio's framework suggests, were not reading their environment with their minds alone. They were reading it with their entire bodies. The soma was an instrument of perception. The hair rising on the arm was data. And when that data was shared, communicated through gesture, through sound, through the particular stillness of someone who had stopped breathing, the whole group received it simultaneously. The body of one became the warning system of many. This is why researchers studying cross-cultural fear responses have found something that initially seems paradoxical. The most effective responses to acute danger in small-scale traditional societies are rarely the loudest. They are the quietest. A specific kind of signal, low, sustained, directionally aware, propagated through a group of experienced people, moves faster than panic. Panic is noise. Noise is information loss. What the most experienced hunters and trackers in traditional communities teach their children first is not courage. It is stillness. The ability to receive fear without broadcasting it, to let the signal arrive in the body, process it fully, and then choose, deliberately, consciously, what to do next. That gap between receiving the signal and acting on it is extraordinarily small, measured in fractions of a second. But it is not nothing. And in that fraction, across hundreds of thousands of years, something was being built. So they learned stillness. They learned to hold fear in the body without letting it become noise. They learned that the gap between signal and response, that fraction of a second, was not empty. It was where survival lived. But here is what no one talks about. Stillness alone was not enough. Because the darkness was not the only thing trying to kill them. Sometimes, it was each other. And this was only the beginning. Because the real question was still unanswered. If the threat came from outside and from within, how did they survive at all? But wait, this is not the whole story. Part 2 is where the thing that actually saved them finally arise. And that thing is still inside you.